Hey, what's going on, everybody? Fizz here once again. So before I get into today's video, I have two things to say. First, Fizz, where have the videos been? Well, I actually got COVID, unlucky. I got COVID, I guess like a week ago now, a few days ago, and it kind of like super scuffed my league start, especially when the symptoms started kicking in after, pushing league start, going for like, 20 plus hours every day. I was really feeling it. So that's kind of why I haven't been making videos. I streamed minimally, and as I started to feel better, I started streaming more, but I didn't have like any juice left in me to like really make videos. I am still sick. However, it is relatively mild. It's just a lot of fatigue and stuff like that. But moving forward, do forgive me if I seem a little bit low energy or tend to like stumble over my words a little bit. I just am still recovering. I'm not completely over it. So that's where the videos have been. There should be more regular going forward from now. Second part, this is going to be probably a very long build diary because there's a lot of stuff to go over unless I forget things, which I'm prone to doing. That may happen. However, there's a lot of stuff I want to cover here to get this out of the way. So there will be timestamps for everything down in the description if you just want to skip around. So I'm going to go over the typical build diary stuff, the passive tree, the gear, the like upgrades I have planned. And I'm going to go over like the mechanics behind the build, why I wanted to make the build, all sorts of stuff here. So it'll all be tabbed out below in the chapters. So make use of that if you don't want to sit through like a 50-minute long video. All right. With that out of the way, this is Fizecs EK Nova Mark 3. Mark 1 was the first attempt. I died on like my first or second map. I opened a strongbox. My freeze flask was down. And I was like, fuck it. I'll just wait. I'll be fine. Spoiler, I was not fine. I got frozen again because it spawned a bunch of sea witches. So I ended up being frozen for like 6 seconds and I just didn't log out. I don't know. It was like a death due to laziness. So that was the first character died. And then I just immediately rerolled it again. The second character got to actually 89, what you're looking at right now. And I died to an essence, another essence. Now, I'm not like a lot of people you see that's fully spec'd essences. It's something I originally planned to do. But I didn't want to do it until I had like a tough character, because if you take all the essence node, the essences get cracked really fast. So I just wanted essences in every single map. It's really, really strong, just this 3-pointer here. And that's all I have spec'd in terms of essences. However, in a T12 map with no damage mods, Aroa broke out of the essence and just pecked me in the nuts, and my character died in one hit. So that was something. It did have like extra cold and powerful crits, so I'm assuming I just got really unlucky with the rolls. Yeah, but that's how that guy died. So we're back again with Mark 3. Now, I'm going to kind of go over why I made this build, what I expect from this build, and what you can probably expect from this build. So originally on day one, if you haven't seen it, the clip's over on my channel. On YouTube, I died day one to the Black Star. I died to a bug that put a really bad taste in my mouth for like the boss rush event and all of that stuff. So I was like, okay, until this stuff gets fixed, fuck bossing, I'm not going to boss. I'm going to theory craft a speed mapper. Since now I've gone over it, in past videos, but just like mapping is like a super valid way to play the game now, even in SSF. So that's pretty cool. I was like, that's what I'll do. I'll just speed maps, build up a ton of currency and stuff. And then when the patches roll in, when the stuff is fixed, I'll use all that currency and crafting mats that I got to craft up a really nice bosser. And that's what I'll do. Well, I was trying to decide between like this and Spark and Ice Shot. Ice Shot got thrown out the window pretty fast because I've like never played a bow build ever in my entire time of playing this game, really. Bow builds were like long dead when I started playing this game. I'm talking about on-hit bow build specifically, right? The only bow build I've ever really played was Ellie Hit, right? When they like reworked Ellie Hit, the way it worked, and they added the threshold jewels in and stuff. And all I did was play Tri-Hit Ellie Hit. I think it was in Delve League. But that's been my only experience with it. So when it comes to like the nitty gritty of theory crafting, there were a bunch of nuances that I wasn't really, privy to. And on top of that, it's just, I think Ice Shot, it's really hard to make good numbers on that skill, I think, in general. So I wasn't able to finagle it to have really good numbers. I tried multiple times and I just couldn't do it. So then it was between Spark and EK. And I want to do a build diary for both of these this league, but I actually settled on doing EK first, funnily enough, because I thought I had the EK Nova Jewel already In a hilarious and tragic twist of fate, I actually did not have the EK Nova Jewel. I had the Spark Nova Jewel. However, it was too late. By the time I like spent like 2 or 3 hours theory crafting the build, made the character, ran him through the beach, I was already set on EK. So when I ran to my stash to go and look, and I noticed that I didn't have it, and I instead had the Spark Jewel, I was too invested to stop. So when I was theory crafting the build, it actually looked incredibly strong on paper. And this is one of those really rare circumstances where when you put it into like the actual game, it's even better than it looks on paper, which is insane to me. So originally this was just supposed to be a speed mapper. I have a lot of faith in this build. A lot of you probably know I don't roll multiple, like I don't usually roll a build multiple times, and I've already died more this league than I did the entirety of Scourge League. This league has been super rough for me, but I just kept rolling it. I have a lot of faith in this build, and I think this build is definitely capable of all content in the game. It is that level of strong. I think it's really, really good. So I'm going to throw in a map here, and we're going to start a map. So this character right now is currently super capable of doing red maps, but I'm just going to throw in this random T10. But I've been trying to focus farm Legion for Glorious Vanity, and I don't want to like super push it into like, you know, like reds and stuff. I just like, I would prefer to, especially since I don't have a Nova Jewel yet, and I don't have Protracted Battle, I want to be able to just immediately delete most of the Legion and not have to really worry about like stragglers or missing something, or like them being too rippy if I get hit with the wrong map mods with, you know, auras and stuff like that. So I just want it to be very simple and straightforward. So I'm farming like high yellows. So I will just do this map and talk about the build a little bit as I go through. So basically this is a Inquisitor. As you can tell, it is a crit based build going full Fizz to LE conversion. Why Inquisitor? This has been asked before. A lot of people are like, can you make this work on Deadeye, etc., etc. I have not tried. Sorry for the Discord notification. I have not tried, but I don't think it would be as good, simply because obviously when it comes to defenses, Inquisitor is much stronger, right? And outside of that, you have like, so you're converting like mostly just to lightning and cold. You will have likely some fire in there as well. But when you're converting to so many different elements, it's actually quite difficult to handle elemental resistances. Okay, hold on. Let me mute my Discord. I'm sorry. So it actually becomes really hard to manage elemental resistances. So the reason I want to go Inquisitor is simply because of that, right? Like, so when you're playing Inquisitor and you go crit, you just don't care about LA resistances anymore. It's really nice for the build. Also, the clear that you're watching right now, by the way, is I probably shouldn't have picked that shrine up, but the clear that you're watching right now is with 1 pierce. So you can get multiple pierce. I'm not using pierce tool or anything. I'm literally just using Poacher's Aim. I do believe that there is a the new influences on the gloves. You can actually roll pierce on them. So if that ends up being correct, PoE DB and Craft of Exile have been like wildly inaccurate with the mods and stuff. But if that ends up being correct, then I will probably go for that late game. But yeah, as you can see, super easy peasy. I'm not going to go through a whole harvest garden right now. That'd make the video way too long, and I get distracted. But yeah, pretty strong, I think. Honestly, a lot of people have been like, what are you doing for single target? How are you handling single target? I think the build has like literally no single target issues at all. I think it does an absolute ton of damage. And my tree right now is super incomplete. You got to remember, I'm only level 89, and I still have a lot of really key things to pick up. And a few hard decisions to make too. But yeah, this is currently the tree. I'll go over it in a little bit more depth in a second. But first, I will go over... No, actually, I'll go over the passive tree first. So when we're pathing here, I'm going to go through the Ascendancies first. Typical Inquisitor stuff. The defenses of playing an Inquisitor. You go into Sanctuary through Pious Path. This is super known by now. It's very common. This shouldn't surprise anyone, really. I've had a lot of people ask me about Instruments of Zeal and going with Fanaticism. And I think this is really, really bad. I think it looks okay on paper because you get a bunch of cast speed, but you got to remember, we don't care about the reduced costs because we're life tapping. Look, I completely sustain the cost of the skill without anything. I hit my focus, which is also life tapped. Everything is life tapped, right? So I don't care about the reduced costs at all. I don't care about the increased AoE at all because remember, EK is a projectile. You scale its AoE through projectile speed, not increased area effect. So all you're getting is 75% more cast speed, and it's incredibly situational cast speed. So like realistically, Instruments of Zeal versus what? Like what are you can't not take Pious Path. You're going to be incredibly squishy. You'll die. The build kind of falls apart without insane levels of regen. You're going to get rid of Inevitable Judgment. I mean, that's a massive amount of your damage, especially on single target. So you can't really fit this in, and I don't think it's good at all, to be honest. Like if this was like, even if it was a 1-pointer, I wouldn't take it. But the fact that you have to like path through Instruments of Virtue to get there is like even worse, in my opinion. So I definitely, before anybody asks in the comments, I definitely don't think it's the way to go. So yeah, Pious Path, tons of regen, typical stuff. It's why Glorious Vanity is so good with the build. Obviously, we get a lot more ES, and we get to basically double our effective HP pool as long as we're not getting one-shotted. So super good there. And then Righteous Providence, basically a bunch of crit chance into Inevitable Judgment, which basically just, like I said, it lets you completely ignore elemental resistances, which is also, by the way, why this build is using increased critical strike support, because on Inquisitor, having as much crit strike chance as possible is actually really strong, whereas typically on most builds it will have incredibly heavy diminishing returns as opposed to just stacking straight crit multi. Obviously, crit chance will still have diminishing returns on Inquisitor as well, but they're not nearly as strong, because if you're not critting, you're losing 90% of your elemental penetration, which is a way bigger damage loss than, just not taking a little bit of crit multi on the tree, right? So, with the Ascendancies out of the way, basically I path up through damage nodes here, and if you don't want to take the damage nodes, and I may end up doing this eventually too, is you can path through the life and take the life regen nodes here as well. The armor nodes are also really strong. Both of these paths through are actually really, really good. You get 1.2% life regen from these nodes, which is pretty strong for the build, especially since we're not pathing lower left side. We actually don't have a ton of % life regen on the tree, so it's actually pretty good. And then obviously pathing through the bottom side here, it's 15% increased ES, which doesn't do a whole lot for the build since most of your ES is being scaled through your life pool actually, but 30% increased armor is a ton of armor. So path up through Retribution. We come down for Discipline and Training. I don't grab Sanctity until later on, but it is a really strong node for the build. Obvious reasons, all those stats are really, really good. Next up, Holy Dominion, Light of Divinity, pathing all the way through the Life Mastery with Devotion. Coming up here, this is where I put my Poacher's Aim. Now, if you get a Implicit with Pierce, if that ends up being a thing, or you get a craft somewhere, you can drop this jewel. So what I was using before I got the crafts that I needed here, the unveiled crafts, is I was using Pierce. So I was running double Pierce in both the helmet and the gloves. Be aware that that craft does cost a Divine Orb, but that's what I was using until I got the Focus craft and the Cold Conversion craft. So there is a Divine Judgment here, as well as the Elemental Mastery. There's a lot of really good things you can take here. I just recently spec'd out of this. When I first got to maps, I took the plus 15 all res. The 1% LE damage leeches energy shield is actually not troll. It's pretty solid, but probably only once you get Glorious Vanity. I don't think it's the best option, but it is something you can entertain if you want to. If you're running Blood Rage with the build, it definitely makes sustaining Blood Rage a little bit easier. Next up, we have 40% increase effective non-damaging ailments. So right now, even in low reds, I'm basically permanently freezing bosses. I have max chill, and I have about 25% shock. Between this and 10% fizz as extra damage of a random element, it'll be hard to tell. I'm gonna have to play with both and really see what I end up preferring. I'm gonna have to see how my chill and shock values are on like actual like end game bosses before I like really make a decision on what's better there. For now, the tree has the gain 10% of fizz damage as extra damage of a random element. This is actually really good on Inquisitor because, like I said before, it doesn't matter what element we're getting. We're scaling a bunch of generic damage, elemental damage, and crit. And we don't have to worry about resistances because we're just going to completely penetrate the resistances. So any element anywhere is basically good for us, right? It's a really cool part about the build. It makes it a lot easier to scale because a lot more things can be useful, right? So the Fizz gained is extra damage of a random element. I think right now, overall, just clicking this node is like a 5 to 6% overall damage increase for the build, which is a lot for one passive point. So moving on through here, this is nothing new. Sovereignty with the mana reservation efficiency. Again, Purity of Flesh with the Life Mastery here. So my Life Masteries are 10% increase max life, 50 flat life, and Vitality mana reservation. The crit masteries, I haven't really taken any of these. Late game, if I can fit in the point, I will take the 30% reduced extra damage from crit strikes. Outside of that, none of them are really... They don't look like that good. The 50% increase effective non-damaging ailments you inflict with crit strikes is also a pretty strong contender. But again, the build, the big part about this build is it's really heavy on socket pressure, and it's really heavy on like passive point pressure. So you're like stripped really thin. I'm gonna, like, some of these like really nitty gritty, like this one passive point over this other passive point, I'm just gonna have to get there myself and test it in like the actual game and see which one feels better to play around. But yeah, as of right now, if I were to take one of the masteries, I would take 30% reduced extra damage from crit strikes. Feels really good. Arcane Potency. So I didn't actually spec this until I went crit. So if you're wondering and you kind of want to play this now, then what I path through while leveling, because I've leveled this 3 times now. And by the way, you can just level as EK. It felt completely fine while leveling. It felt really strong while leveling, actually. As soon as you hit 34 and you get your Tornado for single target, you just shred everything. It's really strong. So I actually pathed through the tree here, and I connected this part of the tree through here for LE Overload, obviously. If you have a Ungles, definitely use the Ungles. It makes sustaining LE Overload on EK really easy. It made leveling a breeze for me. If you don't have Ungles, don't worry about it. It is just a little bit of quality of life. Just remember to replace the Ungles when you swap to crit, probably around Merc Lab when you get your first crit Ascendancy. Anywho, pulling on path through here. I will go over the crit nodes here as well. Again, don't take crit nodes while you're leveling. But Disciple of the Forbidden, insanely strong node cluster here, right? So we get a bunch of mana regen per power charge. Doesn't really matter to us too much. But we do get 8% crit chance per power charge. We get 5% crit multi per power charge. And +1 minimum and 8% chance to gain a power charge on kill. That's how we're getting power charges while clearing. And 8% increased just generic damage per power charge. And on top of that, with the mastery, we actually get shock immunity while at maximum power charge. Now, we're basically always at maximum power charges, which lets us always be shock immune. Now, between that and the Pantheon here for freeze immune, you have like a lot of leeway on what minor Pantheon you realistically want to take. For the most part, I've just taken the bleed one from Relicash to make mapping a little bit easier for me. But this is probably not what I'm going to be using endgame. Though I probably will swap this. Things like Cirrus, as you can tell with this tree, there's no easy access to the CB immune mastery. So the Relicash Pantheon may actually be what I end up going for fighting like Cirrus, you know, because CB is an issue on him. And it shouldn't be much of a problem on Inquisitor, simply because you have so much regen, especially once you get Glorious Vanity. And you have the Relicash Pantheon, which will make you take less damage from CB, and it won't be able to stack beyond 5. It should be completely fine just fighting him with, you know, without full CB immunity. It shouldn't be a problem for the build. So this does make you, taking Disciple of the Forbidden automatically makes power charges like incredibly efficient to path for. But they are the very last things I plan on taking on the build. So do be warned. They're the very last thing I plan on taking. So after that, I path down through Cruel Prep. And right now I'm pathed on the left side of this simply because it saves me a point. Ultimately, though, I think it goes without saying that you do want to path through here and link up through Annihilation. I just didn't have the points for it, and I kind of wanted to get more life and stuff first because I didn't feel like I needed any damage at all, so I'm just fine with this for now. But eventually, you will want to path through here, link up Annihilation, and grab this power charge here. Probably grab the spell damage charges, or the spell damage node here as well. It's 1 point. And depending on how many power charges you get, it's bare minimum 12% increased spell damage, all the way up to like 20% increased spell damage if you have 5. So it's pretty good node. Pathing all the way through here, connecting the tree. Again, this is another crit node. Nimbleness is really good. However, don't take this until you go crit. Melding, life is max ES. Very amazing stat. Melding is really strong nowadays. Now, with Nimbleness, it actually gives you a bunch of cast speed, which again, you're gonna like really prioritize cast speed. Modern day PoE, Spell Echo is the way to go on self-cast builds. get as much cast speed as you can, because cast speed is pivotal for Spell Echo to really shine and also not feel terrible. So there's a really cool mastery here we get on the caster mastery, and that is intensity as +1 to maximum stacks. So you'll notice right now I'm not using anything that uses intensity, but our 6th link is Pinpoint. And if you're wondering why Pinpoint, well, if we look in my weapon swap where I'm leveling it up, so it's only level 19 right now, right? However, supported skills deal 20% more damage, more projectile damage per intensity. So you have 3 base intensity. When you grab this caster mastery, you get 4 intensity. This is 60% more damage for most support gym, while at max stacks on single target. This is another great reason why you really, really want to scale cast speed as much as you can, because the faster you can get to 4 intensity stacks, you are going to be dishing tons of damage. This is like, this level of damage gain is how much damage you used to get from like old Archmage getting a 6 link. It's a ton of damage. And you may be wondering, well, like Fizz, why are not you, if it's so big, why are you not using it in your 5 link? Well, simply because crit strikes in general is going to be a lot more consistent. It is obviously less single target damage, but it really helps, especially when there's a bunch of crit nodes I haven't taken on the tree yet. It really helps to keep my crit chance up high, so I am constantly taking advantage of my Ascendancy node. And I just don't need the damage. I am melting everything so fast. And you have to remember that when you have no stacks on Pinpoint while you're clearing, you're going to be dealing 16% less damage on the first hit. And do know that Spell Echo actually doesn't stack it. So when you Spell Echo and it's cast twice, you don't get 2 intensity stacks, you only get 1. And that is actually a good thing. Otherwise, while clearing, you would just like, from the first shot, you would just like cut out like half your projectiles, and it would probably feel really bad, especially once you get the Nova. But yeah, this is huge. So it's why I'm not using it in the 5 link though, because like basically while clearing for your first hit, you'll get a few extra projectiles, which as you can see, I don't really need. And I'm basically just losing damage to do that. So the 5 link crit strikes feels better. But yeah, this is huge, and the mastery is going to be really big later for like actual bossing. So after that, we split 2 ways. Going up here, so you can level with Rim Sorrows. It'll make your straight from level 9. It'll give you full LE conversion really early on, and it's super comfy to level with. However, once you get towards endgame, you're going to want to get another source of elemental conversion. So the way I'm hitting 100% conversion right now is using Fizz to Lightning, a Unveil Craft with Fizz converted to cold damage, and the Cold Mastery, which is 40% Fizz to cold. Now, I really, really wish that GGG would just make this 50% so I didn't have to waste a glove slot, or they made it so influence mods like Veritania or the Unveiled mods could hit 50% conversion, because it feels really bad having to like overlap a bunch of like resources to get my last 10% conversion, but it's stupid not to. Because for cold specifically, it's again a 5 to 6% damage increase for that last 10% conversion. Funnily enough, if you only have the lightning or fire conversion, I actually don't recommend you use the craft and you just stick at 90% conversion, because it's like a 2% damage increase, and it doesn't seem really worth it when you can do a lot of other stuff with the gloves over just putting that conversion craft on the gloves. I would only recommend getting the conversion craft on the gloves once you get, in like an SSF environment, once you get the cold conversion specifically. However, this node, I originally hated this like node a lot, but honestly, all of the like the duration, the increased effect, the chance to freeze, increased effect, duration again from Fingers of Frost, this right here is like, it's very noticeable when you take this and everything just stops moving. It's like playing an occultist. If things don't die in one hit, they just don't move. They're permanently frozen, which is why I don't think I'm gonna have any problems with this moving forward. But honestly, this with just like the crit mastery that gives you like increased effective ailments, or the elemental mastery that gives increased effective ailments, would probably just like straight put you at 30% chill, 30% shock for like everything in the game. It's actually wild. So moving on from there, we go for influence as you do. Reservation mastery, we grab increased effective auras. We're using a ton of auras with the build. We get a bunch of armor from determination. Zealotry gives us more damage. Hatred gives us more damage. Defiance banner is better. Like just everything. It's so, so good for one passive point. Moving on here, we have a super big node for this build. This is one of the most fun nodes you're going to click while you level this build if you decide to play it. So your first node here, you get 10% chaos and 10% physical damage. The chaos does slightly matter because you'll see in a second, but you're scaling fizz damage here, it's nice. So each one of these small nodes gives 8% fizz damage, which is really good for the build. And you also get 3% increased attack and cast speed for each one of these. Now, attack speed is important because it makes your shield charge faster, which is actually really nice. The more attack speed you get, you definitely feel it. And then cast speed goes without saying. And then the final node is 4% attack and cast speed while also gaining 10% of fizz damage as extra chaos damage. It feels amazing to click. And once you finish taking Force Shaper, you'll spec into the Fizz Mastery and get 40% increased physical damage with skills that cost life. Obviously, we're using Life Tap, so that's a ton of damage for this little cluster here. This is amazing. Super big damage concentration. So after that, we grab Written in Blood and Doomcast here as well. Now we go down here towards Trickery, Assassination, Generic Crit, Blood Siphon, bunch of life and life on kill. Coordination, really good. Obviously playing a build with a lot of dex-based gems, and your main skill being a dex-based gem, you want as much dex as you can get. So you get a bunch of dex, you get a bunch of attack speed, you get a bunch of cast speed. Everybody's happy. It's an amazing node. Moving on through Will of Blades, a bunch of generic percent fizz damage as well as crit chance, feels really good. Into Fangs of the Viper, 20% chaos damage, does slightly increase our damage since we are, getting a, 10% of our fizz damage is chaos now as well. 5% move speed, 20 dex, 20% fizz, goes without saying. All really good nodes, or stats rather. We care about all of that. So after this, I want to grab resourcefulness, 5% spell sup, 5 life, 10 max ES, and you're gonna path through here. I hate this. I hate this so much. I wish they would just delete these two nodes and then just connect this with here, and then resourcefulness could be here. It'd be so much better. Anyway. So after resourcefulness, going through Blood Drinker, getting all the passives here because there are 6% small nodes, so super efficient. And we have to path up here because this is where our EK Nova Jewel is going to go. This is the only socket on the entire tree unless we go like way down into Ranger territory, like way down here, right? So basically, if you're wondering why this tree starts here and goes mega right and starts, taking a bunch of stuff over here, obviously, there's a ton of really good stuff over here. You'd have to go over here for Cold Mastery stuff anyway, but you have to be here specifically for the EK Jewel. So after you get all of that, you're going to want to grab Power Charges. Throat Seeker is something I may or may not go for, and I'm going to go over that in a minute. In the original tree, I had Throat Seeker, but I will go over the caveat for that in a second. Like I said, you're going to want to link up Annihilation. Again, you have Power Charges over here. There is Divine Fury and Divine Wrath, but I didn't really, you only benefit from the 5% gained as extra fizz because you don't care about the pen at all. So these nodes I actually don't think are very good. Other than that, you have the Elemental Mastery, probably the 10% fizz extra element. And then you can grab 1 or 2 crit masteries, reduce extra damage from crit strikes, and then possibly on endgame bosses if you're not getting max chill, max shock, or at least a really healthy amount of it, the increased effect of non-damaging ailments. So that's basically the full overlay of the tree. Full breakdown. Again, power charges here once you link up Annihilation, because you don't need to spec, this node just to get the power charges. You'll be routing through here. So why may I only, or that came out wrong. Why might I not go Throat Seeker? It is so much crit multi. Well, the thing is that this is 4 passive points, right? So you'll notice that I can actually link my tree here instead of here. And what you can actually do, if you link here, you can spend those 4 points getting Instinct. So what does Instinct give? Well, it gives you some ES recharge rate, which is cool, I guess, and some flat ES whenever you suppress spell damage. However, you get 4% for both of the small nodes, spell suppression, and you get 10% for the big one. So that's 18% spell suppression. And if you take the spell suppression mastery, you actually get an additional 10% if you have evasion on all your main bases. So this is 28% spell suppression for 4 passive points, which is really strong. When you pair it with just resourcefulness, you actually have 33% from the tree alone, which should give you a lot more leeway in terms of like your spell suppression gearing. obviously I play HCSSF, so I care a lot about spell suppression and damage mitigation and stuff like that, especially in this league where it seems like Act 2 mobs, especially the skeleton mages, are cracked beyond fucking belief. So yeah, spell suppression, even more important this league than it was last league. And this is something I may end up doing because realistically, I don't think damage is going to be a problem for me on this build. But it is something I will eventually have to decide. And you'll have to decide too if you decide to do the build. If you want to go for the easier gearing with spell suppression, or if you want to go for Throat Seeker. Something you can also do if you get like really good gear, or you hit like a healthy amount of spell suppression, because spell suppression is worth going for even if you don't hit 100%, if you don't know. I mean, even if you get like 40 to 50%, you are 100% going to feel that in maps. You're going to feel that on bosses. It makes a huge difference. So it's not like if you can't get 100%, don't build spell suppression. I'd say if you can even get like 30 to 40% comfortably, go for it. It is going to make a massive difference in your survivability. However, if you want to give up that 10%, there is the crit strike chances increased by chance to suppress spell damage. But again, this is going to depend a lot on your specific gear. If you only have 30%, this is probably not going to be worth it. However, if your spell suppression capped and you don't actually need the extra 10% from the mastery, you could grab it. 100% increased spell suppression chance for one node is insane. Bang for your buck. But yeah, that's basically everything. So yeah, that's the whole tree. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I'll answer it best I can. So now we are about at the 30-minute mark. Let's get into the gear. So moving on. Actually, I think I'll go, the gear and the gyms are pretty close, similar, but we'll start with the gyms. So I'm going to go through the main setup. I've touched on it a little bit already, but we're basically using EK, as you do in an EK build. Life tap, again, it's mandatory for the build. All the auras we're running, let me actually turn them on because I did weapon swap. All the auras we're using, we have exactly 32 mana right now to spare, and I still need to level up vitality one more time. So basically, we have no mana to spare. So life tap, super huge on the build. It also gives you a bunch of extra damage on the tree and stuff from the Fizz mastery and stuff like that. So it's actually not that bad of a node really, or support. Spell Echo, again, huge for the build for multiple reasons. I'll go over that once I kind of start talking about single target. Fizz to Lightning, and increased crit strikes. And then again, we will be using Pinpoint whenever I get a 6-link. Now moving into the helmet. So what you're going to want on your helmet is the Unveil mod for trigger socketed spells when you focus with a 0.25 second cooldown. This is basically going to be like your single target setup. You have increased duration linked with Tornado. Your Tornado ends up being out for a whopping almost 10 seconds collectively between the initial duration and the secondary duration. And then again, you will actually like, you know, this is only level 19. You'll get to level 20 and then you get, you know, you flip the gyms, you'll get even more skill effect duration on that. So it's going to be like 11 or 12 seconds endgame. So you have so much uptime on this. And then you, like right now I have Assassin's Mark in my focus helm as well. If I end up getting mana to sustain, like if I end up getting enough mana to like use a high level Assassin's Mark, then I will do that. But like right now I can't really do that because I don't have enough mana to cast it realistically. But it's something I'm gonna have to play around with if I want to trigger it with the focus or not. While bossing, it doesn't matter. They're permanent now. However, when I'm like mapping and there's like an essence monster is a good example, or there's like a map boss that has some ads next to it, it typically casts Assassin's Mark on whatever is closest to you. And sometimes it'll throw it on a random mob beside me and not the map boss, which makes the map boss take incrementally longer. Assassin's Mark on this build is like a massive damage increase. It's like 25 or 30% increased damage. Not like increased damage, but like overall damage gain. So like you kill the boss a good deal slower if you don't have it. I've still been melting bosses anyway, but it does annoy the shit out of me. So that may end up changing. It really comes down to it because again, socket pressure. And then the last thing I have here is life tap. Again, you notice I pop it. Costs me basically nothing and everything comes out instantly. So why the focus craft? Well, basically the way Tornado works is when you cast Tornado, it has a small duration where you're able to hit it and it will take that damage. It'll store 10% of the damage similar to Impales and reflect 10% of that damage back each time it procs on the enemy. And it procs every 0.25 seconds, which is very fast. And I will get into why this is super important in a second in terms of like sustaining power charges on single target. But in general, you can hit it up to 20 times, right? Which is 10 casts of EK with Spell Echo. So currently, I don't have enough spell cast speed to get full stacks on this. And you definitely want to try to get at least as close to 20 as possible. I think right now I get like maybe 10. So I could potentially double the damage of my tornado, which is insane to think about because it already does so much damage. However, the way you kind of want to use it is you'll start casting and then you'll hit space here and you can see the white marks on the tornado each time I hit it. Once the white marks go away, it means it's no longer targetable and that damage is stored. So, why the Focus Craft? Well, funnily enough, if you self-cast Tornado, it is actually immediately available to be targeted. Basically, as soon as the skill appears, while you're still in your casting animation, that initial duration to hit it is already ticking down. So you actually lose a bunch of hits on the Tornado if you self-cast it over using the Focus Craft. It actually adds so much more damage to do it this way, as well as being a lot smoother, to be honest. So that's why the Focus Craft. Now, moving on from there, we have Shield Charge, faster attacks with Life Tap. This is just whatever. Divine Blessing. I'm going to go over that last. Determination, Defiance Banner, and Vitality, all in the wand, just typical Aura stuff. In the gloves, we have Herald of Ice, Hatred, Molten Shell, cast when damage taken. A lot of you know by now, but for most builds, I like to use a level 2 cast when damage taken with a level 11 Molten Shell. Now, I will get into... first, I'm going to explain the power charges for single target, and then I'll explain my last link setup. So, power charges for single target. Assassin's Mark, when you put quality on it, and only when you put quality on it, has a chance per 4 quality to give a power charge on hit. This is how we're sustaining power charges on single target. So right now I only have 3%. And if you're worried about this being like inconsistent, I wouldn't. I've had no problems at all single target sustaining. So right now I have 3%. When it's at 20 quality, it'll be 5%. So between casting, you know, EK a bajillion times a second and your tornado proccing 0.25 times a second, so you're hitting 4 times a second with the tornado, as well as like, you know, 4 times a second roughly with your EK, maybe more, and it only scales with cast speed, mind you, you're going to be hitting so many times that the chance that that doesn't proc at least once every 10 seconds is incredibly low. I've had no problems at all sustaining power charges. So now we go into the last link setup, and this is absolutely massive for the build. So I have 2 things linked to another life tap setup. Flame Dash is 1 life tap. And lastly, we have Divine Blessing. If you guys haven't heard about this tech by now, basically you can assign an aura to a Divine Blessing. When you cast it, it'll basically take however much mana that it would reserve, and it gives it to you, that aura, it gives it to you as a temporary buff. Now, if you link this with Life Tap, it will take whatever amount of mana you would need to spend, and then just applies the typical Life Tap more multiplier to it. So, I pay 1,900 life, and I gain Zealotry. Now, you may think that's a lot of life to spend. It kind of is. However, I have more mana than I kind of want right now. I actually have mana ruled on some of my gear. It's just circumstance. It's not what I plan on having later on. I also don't have nearly as much life as I'm going to have in game. The more life you get, the less life, you know, you're losing. Because the life cost is not going to go up as I get more life. So, relatively, you know, when my character's sitting at like 6.5k life, this is way less of a cost. Also, my life regen is only going to get stronger as I get more life, so it will regen even faster. But typically what I do is, you know, I will pop Zealotry directly as I pop my potion, or my life flask rather. And I also have Leech in the build from my boots. Damage Leech is life if you've killed recently. It's not mandatory, but it does basically instantly top me off. Now, this is insanely strong. This is, again, if you plug this into PoE, it's like 30+% damage increase for the build. It is absolutely huge. And this is very similar to like Vol RF, but not as rippy because it doesn't also take your energy shield. However, this has the very distinct advantage that it lasts just over 11 seconds right now, right? So you have the very, very, very big advantage here over like something like Vol RF. Again, this gives you more damage than Vol RF, by the way, which is crazy. But you have the very big advantage here of you pop this whenever you want. Whenever you feel safe, you use this, right? Because it lasts so long, it's very preemptive. something like Vol RF only lasts for a few seconds, and you need to use it right when you need it. However, typically what I do in maps is I pop it preemptively. I enter the map and I use it. I kill a bunch of packs, and then like as I'm transitioning to the next pack, I pop it. While I'm killing bosses, I pop it, you know, like in intermissions and stuff. It's really easy to have 100% uptime on it. And again, this is the absolute worst it's ever going to look. On my last character, it was closer to 1600 life. 300 life is a pretty big difference. And that character had like 1,000 more life than this character as well. So like as you get more life, you're going to get more regen on Inquisitor. And as you lose mana, the life cost is going to go down. And again, as you get more life, you're going to be losing relatively less life. But this is incredibly strong. At the very least, you want 100% uptime on that for a single target. It's so much damage to the build. It's incredibly, incredibly good. Now, we're going to move on to gear. So my wand is pretty nice. I got this from a ritual last night. Ton of spell damage, ton of cast speed, decent amount of crit chance roll, and okay flat fire dispels, and I bench crafted on global crit multi. This is a pretty solid wand. Not going to be the end game wand, but it's probably going to be, this is like 1 or 2 wands away from my super end game one. This is a really sick wand for early game, to be honest. Like, could not ask for better stats realistically in like a T6 map that I picked this up in. Moving on to the helmet. This is really whatever. It's life and it's cold res and the trigger craft. You need to open suffix for it. Shield, this is a pretty weak socket as well. The only thing is it actually rolled with 13% increased chance to block, so it's actually got 38 block chance on it, which is pretty wild. I'm blocking a lot of attacks. Other than that, 39% increased cold damage is actually a fat damage increase for the build. If I mouse over Ethereal Knives, you see that I deal 700 chaos damage, 200 fire damage, 6,700 lightning damage, and 10.8 thousand cold damage. So, you know, 39% increased cold damage, that's actually a fat chunk of damage increase for the build. A ton of life, a ton of res, pretty decent shield, not what I really want to use. I have an Ons, which gives you +2 to max res if you don't have max endurance charges. Obviously, I'm not using endurance charges in the build currently. However, I don't have like my resist balance well enough to use Ons because I'm relying on this right now to give me a lot of my resistances. So can't use Ons right now. I think eventually endgame I want to use like a Saffles just because spell damage seems to be the enemy this league with the Act 2 monsters. Getting a bunch of max res as well as a bunch of free spell blocks seems really good. But yeah, probably what I want to aim for like long term. I just haven't dropped the Saffles yet this league. So on the boots, I have tier 1 life, some res, some move speed, and some flat regen. Now, if you don't know, on Inquisitor, the flat regen rolls after they got buffed last league are insanely strong. If you have the ability to get flat life regen rolls on your pieces of gear, definitely do it. It's incredibly good on Inquisitor. Very synergistic with Pious Path. And funnily enough, I picked these boots up in Act 4. They're item level 42. I don't think I've ever picked up boots with 89 life on them in Act 4. Absolutely wild. Anyway, damage leech's life is really good. I'm probably going to go for a leech amulet at some point too. I'll go over that later on when I talk about upgrades. Now, in the gloves, I know the gloves aren't super good. Basically, I'm using them because they give me a bunch of chaos res. Now, I do have a bunch of upgrades actually sorted out, and I will show you guys those in a minute, but it's mostly, I think, sockets and colors that have been an issue for me. Now, moving up into the rings, I have 16% global crit multi, a massive flat ES roll, crafted on life, and some lightning res. Not a super good ring, but it is a decent amount of damage and survivability on the ring. It's pretty decent. In the next ring, we have another 2-stone with just a bunch of res on it, honestly, just a ton of res and crafted on life. Now, the sad part is that I do have mana on this ring, and it's a shit ton of mana. 63 mana is a lot. So, that is making my Divine Blessing cost probably at least 100 more life, I would wager. But it is what it is. These rings will definitely be replaced by endgame, but they are really nice for the time being. Now, my amulet's pretty solid. I'm pretty okay with it. 3% increased spell damage is whatever. But it does have, I think that's tier 1. Tier 3. Tier 1 is 38%. 28% global crit multi, really strong. 11% increased armor. It's better than nothing. Tier 1 life and some res. Can't be mad at that. It's pretty good. There is a really good craft you can get on your amulet that gives you projectile speed and projectile damage. I'd probably recommend that. It's what I had on my last amulet on my last character. I just don't have any open crafts on this, and I don't want to annul it. It's not good enough. For your early game anoint, by the way, you're looking at Fury Bolts. So Fury Bolts is really good in my opinion. Gives you 20% prod speed, which again is basically AoE on your EK. And 20% increased prod damage while also giving you strength. Now, strength is really good for two reasons. Projectile damage is just damage, and then strength gives you life, as well as because of your ascendancy, you get more crit chance based on what your lowest is between strength and in. So basically, 20 strength is 20% increased crit chance. So this anoint is incredibly strong. My endgame anoint, though, I think what I want to go for is long shot. I think long shot is insane. So you get 30% increased projectile speed, which is again 10% increased AoE basically. And then projectiles gain damage as they travel further, dealing up to 60% increased damage to hits with hits to target. So that's 60% increased damage for one passive point on your anoint. You get a bunch of AoE and you get a bunch of damage. Like 60% damage from one node is a shit ton, you guys. It is a lot. And long shot's very unique in the sense that almost every node you see on the tree that's like this will specifically say projectile attacks. So long shot itself is only projectiles, so this will work with EK. This is probably going to be the endgame anoint because it's just so much damage. Even if it isn't the most damage, it will definitely have the best balance of damage and clear with projectile speed. So that is the amulet. Now, the belt, the last piece, it's nothing crazy. It's got some life. It's got a little bit of res, and it has dex rolled onto it, which is actually currently saving me from having to, not anoint, but spec either alacrity or agility. So I'm using it right now. Basically, dex essences, I'm crafting belts, trying to get something good. That's all it is. Now, upgrades. I don't know if I'm going to be using this endgame because obviously new influences and whatnot, they very well may end up being better than a Blizzard Crown. However, Blizzard Crown is a ton of damage. This is a 10 to 11% current on my current character damage increase overall. Again, when I say damage increase, I don't mean increased damage to the stat. I mean it will increase the overall damage of your build by 10% to 11% in total, right? So basically, this is really good for us because we get a ton of flat added cold, and we basically get to completely ignore the downside of it because we're scaling crit, Inquisitor, we don't care about resist, right? So we basically completely ignore the higher cold res, and we just get a bunch of flat cold. So I've just been crafting this, trying to hit something good. This is my only Blizzard Crown base, so I've been really stingy about what I'm going to actually let through on this. Basically, what I'm looking for is a tier 1 life roll, a decent amount of chaos res, and preferably a flat life regen roll, and I'll work with it from there, as well as having an open suffix so I can craft on focus. I don't know if it's going to be the super endgame setup because again, it doesn't have any armor on it, which may be a deal breaker for me in the endgame. I'm not sure yet. We'll have to see. But this is a contender for the final base for the build. Now, moving on from that, crafting, I actually have a decent pair of fugitive boots here as well. I just have not colored them well yet. It's really good. Resistance, 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 max move speed. The implicit 16% chaos res, because right now I am slightly struggling with chaos res. I'm at minus 6%. It's not terrible, but it's not great, especially for moving into like red maps and higher red maps. And then bench crafted on life. This is really solid. The only thing I would prefer to have on this is if one of those Ellie reses was in fact a chaos res roll instead, and I already had life and I needed to craft on move speed, because preferably what I want with my endgame boot setup is spell suppression, good res, including chaos res, and like probably tier 1 life with a open prefix so I can craft on movement speed and onslaught on kill to automate my onslaught and be able to drop the onslaught flask. So moving on from that, that may be the only other upgrade that I have lined up. This pair of gloves is really good too. I actually have 2 really good pairs of gloves compared to this. But the thing is that it's like a resistance based thing. So these gloves are really good. They're tier 1 life, obviously. They have 73 flat life per second regen. I just went over a tangent. about how good that is on Inquisitor. They also have 16% increased life regen rate, as well as a resist roll. So these are really, really good gloves. The problem is they have no chaos res, and I'm currently struggling with chaos res, and these gloves have 22%. So I'd be down in like -30 if I drop these gloves right now without getting chaos res in other sockets. Now this other pair of gloves, really good. They have dex, they have life, they have fire res, they have chaos res. It's just kind of like a question of like, again, it's like a socket thing, basically. I don't want to use this. I mean, if you can see, I have no jewelers and I have no chromes. I've been trying to like socket and recolor stuff. I've had honestly very, very, very bad luck this league. Even just getting a third, it only took me a few chromes to hit 2 red sockets on this wand. Just getting a third red socket took me like 150 jewelers. Like, I'm not being wasteful with my currency, but it's just, I've actually had like a terrible luck. But yeah, those are upgrades that are literally just waiting on sockets to be fleshed out. After that, that's what I'll be using. So my next big goals for the build, as always, I'm just farming everything that I can, just playing the game as much as I can, trying to get the EK jewel to drop. As soon as I get that, I'm probably just going to spec out of like a crit wheel somewhere and take that so I can have it instantly. It will massively increase clear speed. It'll cut down the amount of times you're going to have to cast EK in a map by about 1/3, roughly, to give you or by 2/3, roughly. 1 to 2/3. You know, it kind of depends on the map. If it's a map like tight corridors, like you think like Bone Crypt or something, you're still going to have to cast a lot. But if you think of something like Glacier, it will literally cut down the amount of times you have to cast EK by like literally 60%. It's insane. So it will let me map way faster. It's also really big in terms of like Legion farming. It'll allow me to farm Legion way faster and more consistently hit entire Legions when they're in stasis. The other thing, farming Legion, like I just mentioned, through, you know, Scarabs from Syndicate, Operative Strong Boxes, Legion rolled very heavily on my tree to try to get emblems for 3 ways, to farm 3 ways to get a Glorious Vanity. I've talked about it earlier on. Glorious Vanity is a massive, massive defensive layer for the build. It gives you a ton of flat ES, as well as basically doubling your effective HP outside of literally getting one shot. If you're not literally getting one shot, your effective HP is essentially doubled. But I think that's everything. I think I've gone over everything at this point. So far, the build's amazing. If you're wondering what Flask setup I have, currently I'm actually not using an instant life flask. That's just because I ran out of alterations and I wanted the CB immune. But you would want to instant with CB immune life flask. I am running a diamond flask with reduce effective curses. Now, the charge recovery with reduce effect, that's not really a super good mod, but I didn't really care to reroll it because again, I was low on alterations. But you at least want reduce effective curses on one of your flasks because it makes you fully curse immune. If you don't know, when you're on consecrated ground with Inquisitor, so baseline, you have 50% reduce effective curses on consecrated ground. With 50% increase effective consecrated ground, that becomes 75% reduce effective curses. So as long as you have a flask rolled with reduce effective curses on it, you are basically completely curse immune for everything. So any curse on like map modifier becomes a completely free mod for the build. Moving on, I'm using Granite Flask with increased crit strike and gain 6 charges when hit by an enemy. Again, these mods or these affixes aren't like super good. The only thing that I would like really say in terms of like damage mods that you would want is cast speed. Rolling cast speed on your flask, you definitely feel it. Like I 100% feel when I don't have this flask up and I'm missing that 14% cast speed. Moving on here, increased armor. This is another one I would say is mandatory. Probably you would want this on your Granite Flask for maximum uptime, but this is just kind of how it worked out for me. And again, low on alterations. So this is 40% or 45% increased armor during Flask effect. It's a bunch of added survivability. But I think that's everything for the build. I think I've gone through completely everything. It's like I said, I was pretty on point. I said about 50 minutes to an hour. Spent 54 minutes. That was a lot. I'm exhausted. Okay, so thank you guys a bunch if you got through the whole video. I hope I covered it a lot. There's been a lot of interest in the build. I do think it is incredibly strong. Obviously, I'm doing all of this in HCSSF. So if you're playing this in trade, the sky's the limit. If you're playing this in softcore, the strat, you know, the galaxy's the limit. Take it as far as you want. The build has insane damage, has really good survivability, has good single target, obviously has amazing clear. There's a lot of stuff I didn't really cover in the video, but I don't want this video to be forever long. I also probably should have mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but I forgot. This build is very likely to be my next complete guide. That's just what I'm calling them. I guess that's what they're being branded as. So if you don't know what the complete guides are, I made a complete Earthshatter Berserker guide. If you want to know what a complete guide really entails, just go check out the video or go look at the POB. You'll notice pretty much instantly the difference between my guides and probably most other people's guides. But yeah, if you're excited for that, if you want to wait for something like incredibly in-depth, like the complete guides, that will be coming out, but it probably won't be coming out for at least a week or two. And I would say very unlikely to be out in a week. But it is something I do want to do for this build. I've been having a blast playing this build. It completely surpassed all my expectations. Cannot recommend it enough. With that said, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you guys for all the support. As I become healthier again, videos will become more normal. From here on, build diary updates for this character are going to be much shorter. Obviously, I'm not going to re-explain everything, but for the very first one, I wanted to go super in-depth so people could understand, because there are a few special things about the build that you need to understand to be able to like play it effectively and gear it effectively. So moving on from that, I'm going to be closing the video out here. Again, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoy the content, please leave me a thumbs up. Maybe consider subscribing. It really does help the channel a bunch. If you did not enjoy it, feel free, by all means, leave me a thumbs down and tell me what you think I can do better. I do read all the comments on my videos. And with that, I'll see you guys on the other side. If you want to see the build played live, feel free to come check it out on Twitch. I'm going live directly after this video is uploaded to YouTube, so I'm going to be streaming over there basically until I drop and I'm too exhausted. So yeah, I'll be over there all day. Anyway, peace guys. Appreciate you a bunch. Have a good one. I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.